now. Right, the Port Nicholson block settlement. Where is it? Right. So the deed of settlement was signed on the 19th of that's the wrong one. This is a new settlement that's been done now. 1839. I'll put that in. Oh, it doesn't really come up now. All right, well, anyway, I've got it anyway, but it was done, the Port Nicholson block was done. I just only wanted the date anyway. It says there 18 September 1839. So I'll have to go back. They've hidden all the actual claim document has been hidden. So, but I've got that, luckily for me. Oh, never mind. Okay, I won't go in there. So that was done in. So they they arrived in the 14th of June 1839. Now it is significant that the it is significant. I want you to look at these dates because if you remember, the St. Pauli arrived on the 14th of June of 1843. And then this one arrived in the Bay of Islands on the 14th of June of 1839. And the Port Nicholson Agreement was signed, to my knowledge, on September of 1839. So after they had arrived, they sailed they sailed the group, that's group number 2. Group number 3, they sailed on the Australian packet on the 14th of June 1839 also. That's when they left. All right. So this group arrived on the 14th of June 1839, and this group left from London on the 14th of June 1839 via the Cape of Good Hope. Now, the Cape of Good Hope, as you remember, connects up to over in South Africa, which is the first place where missionaries turned up over in South Africa, and they called that the Cape of Good Hope. Then the Martha left on the 10th of November to land them in the Bay of Islands on the 9th of December 1839. Then group number 4, courtesy now, the French Navy had come in. Now, I have read about this. The English Navy came in and the French Navy came in, and they started bringing in their ships to surround the country. The country was absolutely being invaded. And when the French Navy comes in, it's no longer the preachers and the priests and the missionaries. It's out of their hands. When the French Navy comes in, that means that country is coming in for a takeover. So the French Navy came in, and then the British Navy came in at the same time. So courtesy of the French Navy, they sailed on the 19th. Now listen up, people. The 19th of February, 1840. They arrived in the Bay of Islands on the 11th of July. So there was a huge battle going on here between the French, the Germans, and the English. The three of them were battling. And the Maori are just not even, the New Zealand natives are just not even in the equation here. It's just a battle to take the country. Somebody was going to take it. The poor buggers. It's kind of sad, really, isn't it? So the fifth group came in. So funds for this 14-strong group had been lodged with the Rights Bank in London. So they were backed by powerful bankers. This just goes to show you that religions are used very nefariously to collect up groups of people, whether they're white, whether they're black, whether they're whoever they are. They collect up groups of people, and then they're used for the bankers, and they're used for all of these great people to maneuver people, to organize protests, to get you and move you around, and you don't even realize that there's this holy battle going on above your heads. And so once you realize that, then you're able to enter the holy war, and you're able to understand about this holy war and what's going on. You can't do anything, but you can stand in your own glory and protect yourself. So the funds for this 14-strong group had been lodged with the Rights Bank in London while they were waiting there for ongoing transport. The bank was declared bankrupt on the 19th of November of 1840. So some emergency funding was hastily arranged from France to cover further travelling expenses. But 1,332 was lost to the mission. I don't know what that number means, whether it's talking about people or whether it's talking about money, or I really don't know. They sailed from London on the Mary Grey. Now this word grey is significant. On the 8th of December of 1840. They arrived in Sydney in May of 1841. There they transhipped the Earl Durham, leaving Sydney on June and arriving in the Bay of Islands on 15th of June, 1841. Now, in 1841, a battle, we'll do all the groups first. Group number 6, they sailed from London in November 1841 on the London with a stopover. Now they stopped, they went directly from London to Wellington. Now this is very significant because all ships had to dock in Sydney before they were allowed to enter New Zealand. And so this here signals the very beginnings of ships that were permitted to dock directly within the land of New Zealand and not have to go through Sydney first. Now this only happened on a very few number of ships, to my knowledge. The other ship was the St. Pauli that docked in Wellington directly from Germany to Wellington. And there were a couple of ships that docked directly to Wellington and a couple of ships that docked directly to Hokianga. But normally, to my knowledge, all of the ships had to dock in Sydney first. Now, these ships that were docking directly to New Zealand, some of them, to my understanding, brought native peoples from their lands and plopped them in New Zealand. And these were people without passports. They were stateless people. They were native people, to my understanding. So this one arrived directly from London to Wellington, and then it went from Wellington to the Bay of Islands. Now, that is significant because Wellington, by that time, had already been purchased. All that area, Port Nicholson, had been purchased by the New Zealand company who had on-sold it to Germany. And all of Nelson had already been purchased by that time. Group number 7, courtesy of the French Navy, they sailed from Toulon on the 15th of August 1842 on the Rhine. Now they went via Brazil, listen to the places, and then they took up a station in Akaroa. Now I'm going to have to do a big research on all of this. On December, they arrived at Hobart, where they transshipped for Sydney to arrive there on the 10th of January 1843. They reached the Bay of Islands via Auckland. So now this is an interesting ship because they sailed from Toulon, which is a French port. They went to Brazil, a Brazilian port where all the natives are in Brazil. And then this is a bit confusing. They took up a station in Akaroa. Now, Akaroa is where Germantown was. And so, but here it says on the 27th of December, they arrived in Hobart. So I assume that they arrived in Hobart first, and then they transcript for Sydney, so they went from Hobart to Sydney. This is a very strange ship. And then they arrived there on 10th of January, and then they went to Auckland first, and then from Auckland they went to the Bay of Islands. Now, if you were a person with a passport nowadays, and if you were travelling to all of these different places with your passport, you would be stopped as an interesting person at the port, because they would be saying, well, why did you need to go to all of these ports? What were they doing? And why? Why did they go to all the different ports? And so obviously they went from France to Brazil. And then this thing here is very confusing because it's not saying when they arrived in Akaroa, where they arrived in Akaroa from, and it's not saying the date that they arrived in Auckland. So we know that they arrived in Sydney on the 10th of January, right? But then when did they arrive in Auckland? And then they left Auckland and went. So this is now up until 1850, the only other Catholic priest in New Zealand was Jeremiah O'Reilly, who arrived in Wellington quite independently of the Pompilia and the Maris. He came at the request of the Catholics in Wellington settlement, his appointment negotiated by the Petrie family. Pompilia accepted him, appointing him a parish priest of Wellington. With Vad's arrival, he stayed on the parish of Te Aro, where he remained until his death in 1880. He's buried in the Mount Cemetery, where a monument in his memory. So there's all these priests came, but they were all French. So this is the French takeover that they're talking about of New Zealand. All of these people. So the last thing that I wanted to talk about, you can equal their dates to when the St. Pauli. So what had happened is their priests left in 1836, and Tenaiti and there you go. Their priests left in 1836. Tenaiti and Diefenbach left from Germany in 1836. Diefenbach and Tenaiti meet in France. Diefenbach had escaped. He'd been fighting in Germany, and he was a Protestant, to my understanding. Then they both met up in France, and then the New Zealand Company went to France and picked those two up. Queen Victoria ascends the throne in 1837, and at exactly 1837, Diefenbach and Tenaiti travel on the New Zealand Company's ship over to England, where they spend 2 years. And then France is sending out their priests, right? And then in exactly 1839 on the Tory, 1839 on the Tory, Diefenbach and Tenaiti start their travels back to New Zealand. They arrive in New Zealand 1839. They purchase Port Nicholson, all of the Nelson area, the Chatham Islands. They purchased all of that, and it was all ceded. It was an absolute done deal by the chiefs. And at the same time, in 1839, the Catholic priests are all coming out from France. So you're going to be a French territory or an English territory. There was a battle, and this is a huge holy war. Now, those ships were being sent out right through until 1843. In January 1843, when the St. Pauli arrived in June of 1843, the Queen in 1841, the end of 1841, the German government announced that Germany was going to be able to keep these islands and these parts of New Zealand as a Protestant Lutheran German territories. They were supposed to be. But on February of 1842, Queen Victoria announced that Germany would not be able to keep those territories, and that England was not going to be happy with having Germany as its neighbour in that territory of Oceania. So England said, no, you're not, and a battle ensued between all of, it's just a big holy war going on in there. Now, so Queen Victoria announced that on February of 1842. Now, during that time, Lord Normanby instructed Hobson, Yes, instructed Hobson to create naturalised people over in Germany to be naturalised people of New Zealand. Now, I'm not quite sure how all that played out. I know they've got all the information. Most of it's over in Germany. Now, Hobson, we know that Hobson dies in 1843 in December, and from Hobson dies 1842, and we know that in December 1842 through to December 1843, there is only an interim Governor General, and we know that Tamati Wakanene was the native Maori king who was running the whole country. So he was in charge And it was not really the Pākehās in charge at that time, to my understanding. The natives were always in charge. And so when Hobson died on December of 1842, and these French ships are still being shipped out, and then in January 1843, the last ship arrives that went to all the different ports, right? And then in June 1843, the St. Pauli arrives in Nelson. So their ship arrived in Wellington. The St. Pauli arrived in Nelson direct, did not go, and it stopped in a territory of Brazil as well. And so I'm not quite sure what's going on there, but there's a big story going on there. So there's this big holy war going on between the Catholics and the Protestants within New Zealand. And then England came in with the 1688 Bill of Rights and stopped the whole thing. And so so this is just, this is going to be open for further discussions, all right? But now we can truly see the timeline of events between the Catholics, who are all French, between the German Protestants, who all came in, and then between England that came in also. And as you all know, it eventuated in the 3 wars. So those 3 wars have all, and then that war is what's going on today. Then we can go back to our Pope here that we were talking about, where he mentions the death of the Cardinal Tom Williams. Now, to my understanding, from 1850 onwards, the French were kicked out, obviously, because England came in, the French were kicked out, the German were kicked out, and England overtook all things. And then what was I going to say about this? So that's significant that this priest has talked about Oceania. This whole area was called Oceania, but New Zealand came under Oceania with Australia, with the 3 islands, Tokelau, Niue, and Cook Islands. They all came under Oceania, and then the rest of them went under Pacific, because some of them went to France and some of them went to not Germany. Well, some of it went to Germany, some of it went to France, some of it went to America. And so we came under Oceania. That's important. Now, in 1974, the Maori Queen went to meet the Catholic Pope and asked for a Catholic bishop. They were all kicked out in 1850, and then asked for a Catholic bishop to come back to New Zealand, right? And then from that time on was developed the 3 primates. They were the 3 primates. They had the primate of Aotearoa, which was to deal with all of the northern tribes, were the primates of Aotearoa. And they say all Maori, but not really, because all of the ones outside of Hokianga area of the French group, all of them were a Protestant group that came under German, the Germans changed to be English at the same time as the New Zealand Maori came to be English. All the schools that were set up in New Zealand were German schools and New Zealand native Maori schools. And at some point, both the Germans and the native Maoris agreed together that they would make their schools English schools for prosperity, and it was going to be better for them. So that's when they closed down the native schools, and they also closed down all the the German schools. In fact, It was the Germans that were beaten for speaking German at school, not the New Zealand Maori. This story of the beatings for speaking their own language came about because when the wars started, they closed down the German schools in New Zealand, and the Germans were beaten even by their own parents for speaking German in their schools, because if they were found to be speaking German, they were getting deported. They were getting, now these people were called immigrants. Now, immigrants, you need to understand what is the difference between an immigrant and an immigrant with an I and immigrant with an E. It is very, very significant. Immigrant with an E means people that have permanently left their country. This means people that are not able to return to their country. Immigrant means people that are permanently settling in a new country. This means that if at some point they decide to go back to be a native in their own country, they're able to do it. Immigrants were not able to go back, and this is exactly what happened to the German settlers and some of those French settlers who were natives of their lands, who were brought on the ships, and when they left their lands, their native lands, they were not able to return. So that was the Germans. All of them were not able to return because they were made subjects when they arrived, and so they were not ever able to return. So those ones were beaten for speaking German. When the schools became English, they weren't allowed to speak the German at school, and their parents forbid them from speaking German at home also. So this is something that happened to both our people and the New Zealand native Maori people. We went through this process together, and that's why we have to remain together, because we went through the same thing together. There's no difference in what we went through, none. And so now where am I getting at? The primate of Aotearoa was for the northern area, and then we had the primate of New Zealand. Primate of New Zealand was for all the Pākehā, not Pākehā, but the Pākehā. All of the Pākehā were under New Zealand, which is the South Island. New Zealand, the word New Zealand comes out of the South Island. The word Aotearoa comes out of the Northern Island, Northern Territories, right, to my understanding. And then a lot of the New Zealand natives or the New Zealand Maori came under New Zealand, and then they came under Protestant territories. So they're Protestant. And then we had the primate of the Pacific. Now those three primates joined together in around about between the 1874 and the year 2000. They joined together. Now why are we thinking, why is this Pope suddenly not mentioning Aotearoa? Because they always, I believe that, in my conspiracy theory, that the king has betrayed the Catholic groups. Those Catholic groups came in 1974 by the Maori Queen, right? And then what did King Tui Heitia do in 2015? He brought on a Muslim onto the Wairau Marae. He welcomed in a proper... people outside of New Zealand have no idea how important these New Zealand Maori ceremonies are and what they mean. They have a thing called the Powhiri, where they welcome the people. It's an official welcome onto the marae. When you are welcomed onto those maraes under a proper official Powhiri, it almost becomes like a constitutional court. It is very, very high up. It's a kingly court. It's almost like going to the palace. Any documents that are signed there by the officials, kings, prime ministers, queens, anything that's signed there is legal and binding in international law, in kingly law, whatever. And they welcomed a Muslim, I don't know what you would call him, but very high up, onto the Wayway Marae. And what did he bring with him? He brought with him the Quran, written in the Tiveo language. That's what he brought, and that's what they welcomed onto the marae. And basically, he became a Muslim king. That's what he basically became. Now, I'm going to see if I can find this picture. Hang on. Now, there's a picture. If anyone can post it to me, there's a picture of the MPs of Parliament standing in front of the Treaty of Waitangi that has been absolutely destroyed at the Te Papa Museum. That's the picture that I'm looking for. And I'll show you something. I'll see if I can get it. This is going to be the end of the video, so. Can you find that picture? I saw it on Twitter. I've got, I can get it. I'm just going to get it. Let's get it. I should be able to get it. Right, everyone just hold. All right, I've got it. Now, all I've got to do is send it to my chats. There. And then I'll do another one. Now, I'll see. Right, now I'm going to show you something. Now, so this is the moment when our New Zealand Maori king accepts the Quran in the Maori language. And look at the headpiece that he's got on. All right, now this particular religious group was kicked out of India and they set up shop over there in England. And then he's turned up in New Zealand. He's looking for a host. What these religions do is they're looking for a host to attach onto. They're not interested in one small little state. What they want is entire countries. They want to own entire countries because these people are not of subject status. Now, people of subject status are not permitted to own the original black allodial title land. They're not allowed to own it. But these other religions are. And they're looking for countries where there are indigenous people or native people who own this black gold, right? And they're looking to go in and host those countries so they can get a hold of that land. And they need you to get rid of the subjects and get rid of the king, the English king, in order to be able to do that. And then once they do that, then they can come in with their religion and take over all of that black gold, and then they get to manage the leases of those lands to the people. This is what it's all about, folks. And so these religions are always battling over whose biblical text is going to be the ruler, because that's who is connected to the black gold. So now have a look at him and have a look at his headpiece, right? And then you can come over to, hang on.
Share your screen.
Eh?
Share your screen.
Yeah. Oh, did you see my screen a minute ago?
No.
Oh, okay. Hang on. I'll
But
open
you
this
described
first.
parasite well.
Did I not share my screen? Hang on.
No.
Right. So, this is not the picture that I'm looking for. Oh, wait, I've got the wrong picture. Let me get the picture first. Hang on. Now, they went to meet the museum. Oh, I'm looking for a picture. Hang on. Can you just bear with me while I get this picture?